Welcome to Lawyers Who Learn, where we explore how attorneys' engagement and lifelong learning fuels their growth. Join us to uncover these journeys and gain insights for your legal career.
Yan rhymes with Stan. That's how I remember. Welcome to Lawyers Who Learn. Really excited to dive deep into a topic that we're all scared about, but we all need to learn more about, which is cybersecurity. So thank you for joining us today.
It's a great pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Me and you have been connected on LinkedIn for a while, and I feel like we know each other in the LinkedIn world, and I'm really excited to get to know you in the real world, just from sharing posts and seeing things that you're doing. One exciting thing is you just published a book called the vCISO Playbook. Did I pronounce that right?
Indeed, you did.
And that stands for virtual. What does that stand for?
Chief Information Security Officer. And the concept of a virtual CISO is oriented toward organizations that are big enough to be a target for cyber attacks, but not big enough to have an in-house Chief Information Security Officer. You might like having an in-house general counsel as opposed to using outside law firm.
And by the way, I think almost any size organization, because we're all, especially nowadays, is big enough to be probably vulnerable. Whether or not they're attacked is one thing, but at least vulnerable and should understand what's going on. And
I'm sorry to report that of the 32 million small and mid-sized businesses over the last 5 years, at least a third of them have had some form of cyber attack that has done them some damage.
And we'll get into that. I just want to briefly share what you've been doing at least the past 20 years. You do a lot of writing. So you're the editor-in-chief of Cyber Defense Magazine, which gets 5 million views a month, which I want to dive into a little bit more.
A little high on that. Actually, we're oriented mostly toward chief information security officers, but we have an outreach program going on right now, which I'll tell you about further down the line.
And your core business is Avalon Strategies, which is focused on risk management and consulting for cybersecurity. You are an attorney. You've been doing this for a number of years now, and you're passionate about helping small to mid-sized businesses protect themselves.
I'm passionate about helping anybody that would like to learn more about what I have learned. I won't say mastered, but what I have learned over the years in my own journey, which, by the way, I refer to myself now as a recovering attorney because I no longer give legal opinions, and I give ample disclaimers about people relying upon what I say as a legal opinion.
So let me start with this question, because we said we want this to be organic and not follow a direction. Because you speak on this topic a lot, you write on it a lot, and you just published a book. Is there any area that you wish somebody asked you about that they don't generally ask you about often enough, where you generally talk about the same 5 things? You got to do this, you got to do that. But is there something bigger or different? And as you think about your learning journey or your growth journey, that you would, if we could, you would spend the entire time talking about today?
Absolutely. There is life after law practice. I have over the years practiced in the government. I was counsel of the House of Representatives Banking Committee for 5 years. After that, I practiced in 4 different venues. I was a partner in a small firm. I was a partner in a medium-sized firm. I was of counsel to a very large international firm, and I practiced on my own, and I learned a lot in that. And at a certain point, I came to the conclusion that this was not what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. So I've had 2 midlife crises, one in my mid-30s and one in my mid-50s. And it's been a number of years since then. David, I would say that I am probably older than most of the people who are going to view this interview. And my preference is not to have age held against me. And to quote Ronald Reagan during his debate in 1984 against Walter Mondale, he said, "I'm not going to make an age an issue in this campaign. I'm not going to pick on my opponent for his youth and lack of experience."
My dad just turned 80. He has more energy, entrepreneurial drive,
Yeah.
and he's in better shape than most 50-year-olds that I know. So,
It's great to see you together in pictures.
oh, awesome. Thank you for that. Okay, so let's dive into that a little bit. So you mentioned you had two midlife crises. I'm 47 right now. Maybe, I don't know. I don't know if I call it the midlife crisis or I wrote a book 6 years ago. It was really focused on what I would consider like the midlife rut, where you've had success and you're comfortable, but you don't know what the next 25 years look like. So does that measure up to your first midlife crisis or your second?
Well, that was right in between my two. One I was in my mid 30s, one I was in my mid 50s. The precipitating event, I suppose, was I would refer back to 1980, which was strangely enough the last time that the U.S. Department of Justice brought a legal action to prevent two banks from merging. Now, when I left the government and I joined a small firm, we did antitrust, banking law, securities, and international trade, all of which I had some experience in when I was in the government. I was in my mid 30s at that time. And there were two cases that came in a row, and they really did change my life. My senior partner at the time was what I would say if you had a tough bank merger, our firm was where you came. And he had me preparing merger applications. These were mergers of national banks, so I went to the controller of the currency. And two in a row, one in 1978 and one in 1979, the Department of Justice attempted to prevent these mergers based on antitrust considerations. And in both cases, we prevailed on behalf of the banks, but the second case was one where I was more actively involved in litigation.
How does this relate to the midlife?
It relates because the case was in Utah, and I ended up moving out there. My life in D.C. was not what I was hoping for, and I ended up, as a result of that case, moving to Utah. I was in Utah for 15, almost 20 years.
So by randomly, you could say, moving to Utah to deal with a case, you ended up living in a different environment.
I did.
I assume surrounded by nature, which, as you mentioned to me off air, that's actually where you live. The screen, the wallpaper behind you is a real photo. So you're saying that had more to do with being surrounded by nature versus something else, or
it was a whole lifestyle.
Lifestyle.
When I moved west in the early 80s, it was completely different. I'd spent some time in the West, but it was completely different. And the DC environment it's great for some people. And it was fine for me for a while, but it was a complete change. And I was going back and forth for the whole time. In fact, that was one of the reasons I ended up changing law firms.
Got it. So that was the first sort of, you said midlife crisis was in your 30s when you moved out there and you realized, oh, I could live a different way. I can have a different lifestyle.
Absolutely.
And then what happened in your 50s?
Oh, it's hard to say exactly what was the precipitating cause, but by the time the smoke cleared from things changing in my life, the large law firm that I was with at the time I was of counsel, we parted ways, and I went off on my own. And I realized, even though I have always worked with teams, and I'll give you an example of one of the first things I did when I was on my own was, you're probably familiar with the Survivor show and Mark Burnett. Mark was one of my first clients when I went off on my own, because the very first eco challenge that he ran in the United States was in Utah. And due to a set of circumstances, I became lead counsel. I put together a team of other attorneys to do all of the underpinnings that are required to put on an event like that. And that was interesting. It wasn't exactly in my sphere of experience, but working with teams of people was. And so even though I was no longer with the law firm, I was on my own, I reached out to other attorneys to assemble a team for Mark. And that was an example, but there were few and far between opportunities like that. And so ultimately, I began to realize this is not really what I want to do either. And I began to look at other things that were of interest. And the first thing I came upon was identity theft risk management. Risk management to me has always been making informed decisions about which risks to retain and which risks to lay off on somebody else. And so I started out with risk management and identity theft. I wrote a textbook for that. There was a certification course that was supported by a nonprofit educational organization. And that turned into something that I could do on my own schedule, didn't depend upon a lot of other people, and I enjoyed it. And it worked from there, from identity theft to privacy issues, the development of state laws. There's still no federal privacy law, but state laws on privacy, beginning with California, of course. And then from there to cybersecurity.
So let's fast forward to today for a
Oh,
second.
please. Sure.
First of all, congratulations on writing your book, because I know how hard that is, and it's very dense and it's very thorough. And in one of your chapters in your book, you mentioned with agentic AI, where it's essentially acts like a human or even smarter than a human, of course, things are really going to be shifting rapidly with identity theft. And I remember reading something that bank passwords and things like that are no longer going to be secure anymore, because through AI and other machine learning, it's going to be able to be broken much quicker. And we're going to have to completely change the way we do things with tokens and other things like that. Where are we at today? Or where do you see in the next few years, just to give a reality check of what we should be thinking about as individuals and as small to mid-sized businesses?
Great question. Where it's going, first of all, is I'm sure many of us are already using MFA or 2FA, multi-factor authentication. So when you go to sign on to your account, and whether it's a bank or anywhere that you do business online, buying things and paying for them with a credit card, there will be, if it's done correctly, there will be a further authentication of who you are, so that it's not somebody who's just gotten hold of your credit card number.
What do you think about what I see many sites doing right now? And I actually really like it. It's called Magic Link, where instead of actually putting a password in now, you put in your email address, it sends you a link, and then you have 15 minutes to click it and it logs you in, or it sends you a digital 6-digit code that's good for 15 minutes. Do you think that's a more secure way of logging in the future?
It's better than just logging on with a username and password, which, by the way, I'd say there's no reason in most of these situations to use your email address as your username. Many places that you sign on, you'll find that you can make up another username. And by doing that, you have made it somewhat more difficult for a cyber attacker. If they know your password, they may not know your new username, but if they can assume it's your email address, that gives them a head start.
Yeah, no, I think with it, a lot of companies use things like OnePass or LastPass or other things, the last password you'll ever need. And it's a little bit scary because on the one hand, it makes life easier because you don't have to chicken scratch it, or you're not using the same password everywhere. But on the other hand, there has been password breaches with these tools. What is your opinion on tools like OnePass or LastPass?
My opinion is that the technology will develop so that we have more secure ways of verifying the authenticity of who it is. For instance, I'm looking at you, or you looking at me. I'm looking at a camera here. It could just as easily be set up to do a retinal scan. It would be just as easy to have on our standard keyboard a place where it can capture a fingerprint.
Certainly you mentioned that with your iPhone, Face ID or fingerprint ID. Face ID is a big part of it.
Yes, it is.
Assuming that like you have your phone and things like that. These are all like little things that it's not a problem until it's a problem. And there, of course, there's also Authenticator, which I use. Google has one, and it's scary how many things I have on there. And it's also scary, even for me, I'm guilty of it. It tells you initially to download these 5 codes and write them down and print them out somewhere, just in case something happens, you can't get in. You're never going to be able to get in unless you're able to have these written things. And do you find that because what I loved about I think the introduction to your book, you said, and it's a great quote, having no plan is a plan. It's a plan to do nothing.
It's very much like the question of, do you have a will? And question comes from the fact that if you don't have an estate plan, it's okay, because wherever you live, that state has an estate plan for you. It's called intestacy.
Yeah.
So there's a plan, whether you want one or not. And as Professor Harvey Cox from Harvard Divinity School said, to not decide is to decide.
All right. So let's just say I'm a small firm, a mid-sized firm, and we don't have a plan right now. And I'm listening to this. And look, we have two-factor authentication. We have LastPass. We have different security rules on our site and things like that. But there's no real sort of plan. What are the things that I should start doing? What are some basic things I should think about for my firm to just check some boxes?
Great, another great. Let me say that all of these decisions occur along a spectrum. At one end of the spectrum is security, and at the other end of the spectrum is convenience. A system that is 100% secure will be so inconvenient no one would use it. A system that's 100% convenient is so insecure no one would use it. So making deliberate choice about where do you want to be on the security convenience spectrum. And with, let's say, a small law firm, we don't have a chief information security officer, but we do have employee training from time to time. We have someone who does our IT, that keeps our software programs updated.
Let me ask you this: what is some low hanging fruit that you see when you go into a firm or an organization where, like, they're just doing things wrong? Like, immediately, obviously, two-factor authentication is one, but what are other things that you see that usually have to switch right away?
I would say let me talk about my partner, Pete Green, for a minute, because he is the technical guy behind this. He's the one that actually does virtual CISO services directly. He also is affiliated with two firms, a parent and a subsidiary, and that's what they do for a living, is provide virtual CISO services. But we also have a relationship with the guru of insider threat concerns. And I would say that the human factor is huge in the ways in which cyber attackers are successful in their exploits. Employee training is probably not being done, things not to click on, things to look for. So I would say the two things immediately would be a risk audit based on software updates, and the other is employee training. Those two things.
And when you say employee training, you mean getting a phishing email and clicking on it?
Yeah, simple things like that.
Yeah. And you have a number of case studies in your book that go through different examples of this. Is there any one that would be interesting, you think, to share here and take us through, like a real life example of what somebody went through, maybe you had to learn something, or your team had to learn as you were trying to help them through a situation?
I hesitate to get into cases that may involve sensitive client information. That's my first concern. But beyond that, I can look at public cases or reports, as we all could if we knew what to look for. And the record is the consequences. And let me use a word that I don't use often, is existential. The existential threat. You think that I'm a small, mid-sized business. I'm not a target because it doesn't have much value. How much of a ransomware attack would be enough to put you out of business?
So how does a ransomware attack work?
For one reason or another, whether it's through an inadvertent employee phishing expedition that gives a cyber attacker access to your data, or whether it's a brute force attack or something else, a software glitch, you get a pop-up on your screen, or you get an email that says, we have gotten access to your data. And whether it is your client data, whether it is documents, whether it's your billing and your accounting system, we have access to it and we have encrypted it. And we want you to pay us this much to get it back, which immediately raises two problems. One is trustworthiness, whether even if you pay, you're going to get access to your data again, or whether you say, I can't pay that. And what are your choices?
Is ransomware, I used to hear about it a lot. Is that considered still the number one way firms and organizations are attacked, or is there something else now?
It's not just the encryption, it's also the threat of putting out to the public stuff that is, you're holding sensitive information of a client, and the damage it does to your firm if that sensitive information is just thrown out on the internet for all and sundry to see. And who will ever trust you again after that?
Yeah. But what else should I be concerned about besides ransomware attacks as a firm?
Data breaches in general. I don't have an excellent answer to that. What else? It's an open-ended thing. There are so many things, and whether you call it ransomware, whether you call it a data breach, whether you call it employee dishonesty, the insider threat matters are
Got it.
again very vulnerable to small and mid-sized businesses.
Let's switch topics to your book.
Okay.
Having written a book, I know how hard it is. What was the process like for you? How many times did you want to give up and then restart? How did you actually how were you able to organize all that information with your partner and actually put it together?
We have a team of people, and this is an unusual thing, and I'm really happy to tell this story because the genesis of the book is that in my work as editor-in-chief of Cyber Defense magazine, we got couple of articles in from Pete Green, who is now my partner in Cyber Risk Management's Associates in Arizona LLC. Better known, by the way, that's my part. So anyway, I began to realize that these articles had really actionable information for two groups of people that basically were not getting together. And if you're familiar with Wayne Gretzky, who famously said, "I don't skate to where the puck is, I skate to where the puck is going to be," I began to realize the puck is going to be at the intersection of SMBs who need to have information security measures to be implemented and virtual CISOs, virtual CISOs. And Pete's articles were all about that, the relationship between vCISOs, who are mostly our readers, and small and mid-sized businesses to whom we're reaching out. It's a magazine, and I said to the publisher, Gary Malevsky, I'd like to get a couple more articles and then put them together in a book. And Pete said he would like to do that too. So that was the genesis. Several articles published in the magazine that we turned into a book together. Now, here's another interesting aspect. I have never sat in same room with Gary. I've never sat in the same room with Pete. But we also have a director of business communications and operations that I've worked together on other projects, and she is never sat in the same room with her either. So this has been a completely remote team operation, and the three of us work very close. Particularly Gary's involved, but the three of us principally, Pete Green, my co-author, and Christy Curtin, our administrator, we work together very closely. So the book has come together and a business plan to go along with it.
Sounds like you need to have everybody at your ranch to meet in person.
Well, we'll have an off-site get-together at some point.
How long did it take from idea to conception to actually publish?
1 year.
Well, that's pretty good. That's
1 year. I'll tell you something else. It's a bootstrap operation. The formation of our LLC, our web presence, the book, the arrangement with Amazon, and over the course of a year, and we're not taking any money out of it.
Yeah, no, I understand.
Yeah, guess what our total cash investment has been so far, including a CPA to set up our books?
12 grand.
Less than $1,500.
Fantastic. I love it. Just your time, which is valuable, 100%.
It is, and it's a labor of love. As you pointed out, I'm passionate about what I do, and that's the enjoyment of it.
Let's build on that. What else gives you energy? What gives you energy in life as you learn and grow?
Being here and living close to the land, living with animals. My wife is a professional artist who is on indefinite sabbatical. She has a side business of her own, but we live here quietly. We live in the place you're looking at is at the end of a dead-end dirt road, but only 5 miles from the courthouse, which used to be anyway. So getting up in the morning, and even though I can't say we have a lot of money, but I can tell you that we live quietly here and we have wonderful neighbors. That's passionate for me. Also, I have another professional activity, which is I am a principal contributor to a satirical website, and it is therapeutic for me. I'm able to read the headlines, and regardless of anyone's political persuasion, people get upset by the headlines. People get gnashing their
Well,
teeth.
what's the website? Can you share?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. It is based on the works of the 17th century French actor and playwright Moliere. So it is called MoliereCitations.com. And it is owned and operated by an LLC called Ridicule LLC, which is based in Virginia. So 2 or 3 times a week, we put up a citation of someone who is either in public office or a celebrity who's doing something stupid.
Okay. I love that. I love that. And look, you're somebody who learns and grows and you share through writing and teaching. And that is something I can relate to. You mentioned briefly that you're a veteran. Is that correct?
I was in the Air Force.
The Air Force. What can you share what you
I,
that
I,
was like?
I can't, it's been so long now, I don't have to kill you after I tell you.
Did you actually fly the planes or no?
No, I was in a program that was jointly run by the Air Force and the intelligence community. It was supposed to be on a career track. And as it turned out, I got my commission at Lackland Air Force Base. And then I was stationed on a SAC base where we had the B-52s and KC-135s, they're still out there flying, believe it or not. But
Yeah.
this is quite a while ago. And we also had 3 squadrons of attack transport planes, C-130s. But after my time at the Air Force Base, I was seconded to the intelligence community back in D.C., and I served out the rest of my Air Force time back there.
You've certainly had not only two, like you said, midlife crises, you've had many different careers and many different experiences. And, that in itself is part of your learning journey and who you are. Well, one of the things I like to end on, and I feel like the time's always too short, but is what about books that you've read in your life or books that the first question is, what are books that you've read in your life that have had an impact on you, if any come to mind? And the second question I usually ask is, what is a current book you're reading or currently read that you want to share? And my goal is to compile a list from all these different interviews of the books that are recommended.
That's also very thought-provoking, because I like to read a couple of books at a time. I like to read something fiction for just kind of escapism, although my wife and I watch some miniseries on streaming services, but fiction, just escapism. And we like things like Dan Brown and Steve Berry and thought-provoking things, especially ones that deal with the current political or information technology issues. And a lot of the writers are doing that now to maintain some connection with what's going on currently, and their own characters that they carry forth. In terms of nonfiction, I tend to read things that are biographical.
Any specific? I know it's hard on the spot, and many
Well,
people, they look at their Kindle app or they look around the room. Is there any specific titles that you can think of that have been transformational for you?
I recently read the Elon Musk biography. I think it was Walter Isaacson.
Yeah.
I read Snowball about Warren Buffett,
What's Snowball?
it's a Warren Buffett authorized biography. I've forgotten who wrote it, but it's Warren Buffett's own story about himself. And he said to the writer, he said, look, something like, don't have a direct quote, but he said something like warts and all.
Yeah.
And it's not terribly flattering. But what I don't like is reading a biography that's somehow been sanitized about people to make them look like they're superhuman.
You mentioned Walter Isaacson's. I'm halfway through the Elon Musk one, but I paused it. But the one that really was a game changer for me was Steve Jobs' biography. I actually listened to it twice, and talk about warts and all. He certainly didn't seem like the nicest guy.
Yeah.
But what really stood out to me was how integral he was to the success of the product launches and Apple. And sometimes you think, oh, the company gets so big, the CEO is not really involved. And it just, for better or worse, it reminded me it's okay to want to be part of the minutiae sometimes if you want to help make sure the product's great. Not to the level that he was, but I learned so much in that about all the products that they built. Elon Musk, I think I'm somewhere, there's an island that they just bought or they're doing launches at. Somewhere in the Pacific, that's where I'm done. How did you like that book?
I was a little disappointed in the Elon Musk book.
I'm not. I don't think I'm going to continue. Yeah.
I don't know. I very seldom just abandon a book in the middle. I'm too curious.
Yeah, I hear you.
But he is unusual. He is mercurial. I don't know. He's certainly not. I don't read these things for a role model. I almost look at them as negative role models, things to avoid.
No, for sure.
What can I learn from this that I don't want to do? And I've had that experience. I had a negative role model in the banking business. I once did a deal for someone who was buying his partner out of a bank holding company. And there were regulatory issues that I managed to, what I will say was somewhat creative to overcome regulatory issues. The deal closed, and unfortunately, the fellow who bought the control got overly ambitious, and it didn't work out. So I thought I put together a group to buy a bank some time back, and we had a more successful experience because we minded our own business. We didn't try to get into everybody else's business. He was a negative role model, and they're important to find too.
100%.
And
a bad boss is you learn more from a bad boss and what not to do.
I would also say one of the differences between adults and children is children have to make their own mistakes, and adults can learn from other people's mistakes.
That's true. But for my last question, I really have to focus on, is there anything that we didn't talk about that you wish we did talk about that is worth bringing up before we wrap it up?
Given who I would expect our audience to be, I would like to chat for just a moment about how I've taken what I have learned, this has been a lifelong pattern, learning things and then sharing with others. Even back when I was in law school, I was part-time teaching elsewhere. I taught at the business school at the University of Utah. I taught courses on financial institutions and mergers and acquisitions at the graduate level, and I had a great time with it. Things I knew that I could teach to others. So I'm going to take from the book the CLE course that we're planning to do on issues that attorneys will encounter in representing small and mid-sized businesses, and especially those who are in the supply chain of critical infrastructure. Now, I know that's a mouthful, but this is coming very quickly. One of the things that I did a briefing on artificial intelligence recently, and 3 points were velocity, how quickly things are changing, governance, that no one's got a handle on how to govern artificial intelligence, and then how to get started. This happened to be a group of older folks who wanted to learn about where do I start if I'm even going to start using artificial intelligence. So in terms of the use of the book, that will be the foundation of the course that I plan to do, representing SMBs and issues that are coming down the pike, like when you go to celebrate your next contract with a buyer of your products or services, and they say a couple of things. They say, number one, we want to make sure that you're in a sustainable situation. How are you prepared to fend off a cyber attack, prevent or be resilient enough to continue? Because we're dependent on whatever product or service you provide. And then the second, which is coming also quickly, especially with government contracts, we need to know if something happens to you and you can't perform, that there's a deep pocket behind you that we can go to. Like, we want to see proof of cyber risk insurance. Are you prepared to provide that? So if that's your client or if it's your law firm, that's what I'd like to talk about, how to wrestle with those issues.
I do know a good place where you can put that CLE program. I might be able to put you in touch with somebody.
You might. I've enjoyed the courses I've done for you in the past.
Yeah, it's always fun having you on, and I'm glad I finally got to meet you and talk to you.
Me too.
And looking forward to diving deep, and we'll continue to stay connected on LinkedIn and diving deeper. And I again, appreciate the book, and I skimmed through it. I'm going to keep going through it as it's important to all businesses. So
Thank you for taking
Jan.
the time. Speaking of taking the time, when is the Schneerman Roadshow going to turn up in Arizona and occupy our guest house?
Which is the roadshow? Who is involved in it?
You. Everything I read about when you take your family on trips.
We were in Arizona and we loved it, and we'd definitely come back. So if not,
we're not that far from the Grand Canyon.
Yes, that was maybe 8 years ago, and I pulled my back out, and my wife had to drive everywhere, but it was a great experience. But I appreciate the offer, and if not with the family, I would love to meet you one-on-one as well in person. First, you got to meet your partners, and then I'm next.
Perfect.
All right. Thanks so much, Jan.
Oh, David, it's been a great pleasure. I sure appreciate you. Okay,
Thanks.
till soon.
All right. Speak to you soon. Bye-bye.